Hi, this is DJ T, aka Mathami from Pura, Danza, Berlin, and you're watching the RRP TV. I was a passionate dancer from my earliest childhood. I can still remember that I was dancing every day in the apartment of my parents, and later also when we moved from Düsseldorf to Frankfurt. And these days, some of the earliest memories I have on music I was dancing to was, the soul and the disco music of the mid-70s to the late 70s. My parents had a few, long players and a small vinyl collection, and that was stuff I was actually listening to. Or later in the late 70s, I'm a big ABBA fan actually. I'm in Bonnie M, and I was crying a lot of tears when the couples broke up and the group finally broke up in 1982, I think it was. I also remember ABBA was my first live concert. I went there with my mom to listen to them. I think it was in 79 when I was 8 or 9 years old. When I was around 9, 10, it was one of my biggest pleasures to invite all my friends to dance contests, stuff like that. And then from 1980 to 1981, it was, especially Afro-American music, Sugar Hill Gang, this kind of stuff, the earliest rap and hip-hop music that got my attention and that I was dancing to. And when the first wave of the breakdance culture, swapped from the US to Europe, and I saw that, culture, I think in 1983, the first time on German TV, I was completely blown away. And, the whole evening after that, I was standing in front of the mirror with trying to do the moves that I had just seen. The next day I had asked my mother to buy me the white gloves. And then I was even going to a dancing school in Frankfurt to, learn breakdance properly in a dancing school. I was going to a ballet class even when I was 14, 15 for 6 or 9 months till I tore my meniscus and had to stop doing that, which was actually okay because it was not my path. But so music-wise, the whole soundtrack of the breakdance era was something that really got me. And there was influences that you can still hear in my productions and my DJing. The whole understanding of creating grooves or playing grooves as a DJ. Later, when I started to go to clubs, from the age of, which slowly started from the age of 16, 17, with a big scene in Frankfurt and around Frankfurt with clubs where especially the black GIs were going. They had their own clubs where they were going with their girlfriends from Germany. And I used to go there. There was one club that was called Funkadelic in Frankfurt, and I was dancing with the black community the whole night, to soul, funk and hip hop. And and then actually in 1989, Summer of Love, the big summer of acid house. Sven Feth opened his The Omen Club, and all the clubs in Frankfurt synchronously, started to play acid house in this summer. And you know how it ended, like in the end of 1989, it kind of broke down because of the whole social political situation, also the whole restrictions, the whole repression that was happening in the UK. But then I was completely hooked. That was my transition from, let's say, Afro-American broken beats to, straight beats from, again, Afro-American, artists from the US house community, but also all the producers that started to produce that stuff in Europe. 7, 8 years ago, I had come to a point where in the years before, I was a workaholic. I had for 20 years, with a magazine and other businesses around the music. I had really worked my ass off, and I didn't allow myself, to really balance. And that brought me to a point where I, started to search for alternative tools and ways to balance myself and heal myself, that brought me to the Sacred Valley of Peru. I think the first time was maybe 2013 or so, and a friend of mine had given me a few contacts for people that were organizing retreats where you could also take part in ayahuasca ceremonies and all of that, and with a lot of different parts and ingredients in these retreats where an ayahuasca ceremony was a part of it, and I had felt that call to do such a ceremony since many years before, but it took actually 10 years to feel ready to do it, And then I was traveling there, and I had quite a lot of time to spend there in the first years, and I always went there in the beginning of the year for between 4 or 6 weeks, and I was becoming a part of this community of Westerners and local people, also indigenous people, that is living together there and working together, and kind of somehow everybody who has moved there, has moved at the same time there for his own dropout or balancing and healing, and also to create spaces to help others to do the same thing, and there maybe 5 years ago, somebody invited me to an ecstatic dance ceremony. I didn't know at all what ecstatic dance was about. It was like, yeah, of course, dancing always, So I ended up in this small ceremony where 15 people were taking part in I remember this little wooden house, that was open to a 360-degree view to the mountains, and on 3,000 meters height, there in the Sacred Valley. And we were dancing there with 15 people to these tribal rhythms and for hours. And I realized, having been a passionate dancer already before I started to go to clubs and started to enhance the experience with certain substances, I had realized that how powerful dance can be, and that when I was going to clubs and I was dancing for 6 hours straight, with only going to the toilet once and drinking 2 glasses of water, and when your body is producing these own substances, that gives you that high that you also get through extreme sports or stuff, I could remember that, but I had kind of lost this kind of dancing, a little bit on the way, which is no surprise, because when you are a public person and a DJ and you are always at parties or mostly when you play yourself, then it's easy to forget about dancing properly, not just going to the dance floor for like half an hour and move a bit around, but like proper dancing, and then I rediscovered that, and it brought me back to the approach to movement and dance that I already had as a child, as a teenager, and it made me realize that also dancing already in this early ages was a connection to the divine for me. So and then I continued to go to these ecstatic dance ceremonies as a guest, and then 2 years after, actually, for the first time, I had this impulse coming back to Berlin, and I was like, I have to check out if there's something like that happening in my own city, not knowing if there was anything like that. And then I discovered there's a huge growing scene here in Berlin, like in all Western bigger cities actually over the last 10 years. And then I started to go to the Berlin dances, and I had this moment of epiphany on one of the first dances, which was at in Berlin, Ecstatic dance. That's the oldest event series here for Ecstatic dance in Berlin. It's there since 10 years, and I was dancing, and at the moment of like, yeah, of course, that's my path, you know. I don't only want to dance for it, I have to play that also as a DJ. And I was completely fascinated by how different this type of DJing is, how different the journey is that you create, you know. Because of course I was also, as a club DJ, I was much more on the eclectic side always than on the side of the DJs that are playing like one style over hours, you know. But the eclecticness of creating this journey was completely blowing my mind, because you rarely play 2 or 3 tracks in a row that have the same style or the same energy or the same type of rhythm. You almost change all that with every track, you know. And the range also, you start with music without beats, just voices, just sounds, and then you really slowly start with beats, you know. It's like, it's a ritual, you know, that you open also an opening ceremony with everybody in a circle, and then like in the beginning everybody is still laying down and sitting, and then slowly the people start to stand up and start to move, you know. And then you create a first wave of an hour over, you know, till a peak where you play maybe even 140 BPM, you know. There are DJs that especially in the US scene, where it's the biggest scene, you know, there's a lot of broken beats played, like drum and bass, jungle, you know, very gimmicky trap also partly, but also really nice, organic, funky, slow grooving trap, you know, electronic hip hop, all that stuff, and so many more styles that you can't even imagine, you know, because you have to experience that, you know. And of course, it's very influenced by a lot of world music styles, you know. So African stuff, Latin American stuff, Asian, Eastern stuff, etc., etc. And yeah, and it completely, you know, it felt like the next evolution as a DJ and as a music lover and as a dancer, and then also as a producer. So it was, you know, going over steps. So first I was only dancing, then I started to play. I'm playing now for a few years, and then last year at the beginning of the pandemic I started to realize I have to produce this also, you know, I have to try it, even trap. And you know, coming from hip-hop, coming from broken beats, I was like, I completely feel it, you know, but I would have never guessed that I would, you know, produce that stuff, or like feel it in the way I was feeling it then. So coming back to what I said before, you know, that moment of initiation, you know, you have to feel certain music in a certain environment, in a certain setting, and then suddenly you understand it. And that was the same with that type of music, you know. If you would have played that music that I produce now to myself 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I would have told you that's not my music. I would never produce that. I would maybe find it interesting, but I couldn't have felt it in the way I'm feeling it now. So now with, you know, standing there and being the master of ceremony to create that journey, all this music has a certain functionality that it's serving in the journey. So that's why I completely feel the call to produce it, you know. And then the next step was, yeah, of course I want to create a platform that is releasing the music. I would probably tell myself, work less, enjoy life more, You know, I was, I mentioned that before, I had found my own business when I was 19, and I was already the music magazine, the Groove magazine, and I was already a DJ, and I was already organizing events, and then, you know, with the brand of the Groove magazine, I was doing a lot different businesses, and then I was also part of running a club, and then we found the label. So I was always very driven by creativity and projects, and there was always a very thin line of, you know, being fulfilled by that and actually losing balance in that, you know, because I didn't really learn how to enjoy the simple things in life, you know, for a very long time. So and then when I realized, wow, I've lived so many years in my life, you know, there's the saying, you live to work or you work to live, you know, doing the wrong version of it, then I had to, you know, invest a lot of time and discipline and also money even, you know, to try to heal myself and rebalance, and that started more or less 10 years ago. And, you know, sometimes I wish I would have realized that earlier, but I'm also trying to not regret anything, and, you know, you always do the things first when you really realize and when you have incorporated a new truth or a new learning, a new lesson, you know, and then you shift, then you change, and not before, you know. You have to, it's a level of suffering that very often, you know, has to be there to really let you, to push you to the shift, you know. As DJ T, you know, for me, it's almost like a cliche to say that, but it's my most favorite club of all times is Panorama Bar Berghain. I've seen everything in the last 35 years, you know, almost all good clubs in the world, especially in the last 20 years, you know, since I'm internationally traveling, but nothing can come close to that, you know, what I always experienced there. Especially as a DJ when I'm playing at the Panorama Bar, which before the pandemic, you know, was happening once or twice a year. And there was one show that through a post that I did, in the moment when I did that post, I didn't realize, you know, because there's always so much media attention on everything what's happened around that club, you know, because people perceive it as the most famous club in the world, or at least most people, you know. And so I played there on a Sunday evening, which is the best time, you know, between like 6 p.m. and midnight, this kind of time frame. I had this 4-hour set, and lightning hit a neighbor building, or one of the buildings that are, you know, attached to the Berghain building. And at Panorama Bar, the music stopped. And I think it was in hot summer, and it was a summer kind of weather thing going on, you know, with lightning, and then the music stopped at the Panorama Bar, and the lights of the bar went out. And later I heard and saw that all the you know, extreme lights that go on in a club when the night is over and the cleaning starts, all these lights went on on the Berghain floor, you know. So it was like super lighted, all this what's usually, you know, a bit more in the dark. And a Panorama, so very quickly also, because the air condition dropped off and it wasn't coming back the whole night, as also the lights at Berghain, they couldn't be switched off anymore for some reason, you know. So it was like that for the whole rest of the night. And then within, the next hour, with no air condition, it felt like 45, 50 degrees in there, which had as a consequence that everybody was, getting topless or naked, So that was probably my show with the most topless boys and girls. Let's let me answer that as Mathami. So what I really want to do on Pura Danza as an artist is to show the full spectrum, this really, really broad range, with I even perceive as a broader range, as a more various range than the whole range of electronic music that you hear in clubs. So I would even say it's, 3 times more than that you can possibly play in such a journey, and in terms of different styles. So I really want to, over the time, represent that on the label, and also try to produce all these styles that I play as a DJ, to produce that as Mathami. And I really want to, so I'm building up a network, a worldwide network of vocalists, instrumentalists, even native and indigenous people, that are making music or singing. And I'm really looking forward to that. And there are voices in that scene that you hear very often. One is an Australian, I think she's Australian, singer. She is, out of this world, like a real alien. How she's channeling music, I can feel when she's singing that she's a channel for whatever, and she's recording her music in power spots, like inside a 3,000-year-old tree, in a crater of a meteor, or on a mountain, or such kind of beautiful, powerful nature places. And there she records. She's flying there for the recording. She's called Dea Dova, and her voice is one of the voices that is heard and played in that world that is touching me the most. Equally alien is and a channeler is Liza Gerard. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her correctly. She's the singer of That Can Dance. Maybe you heard about That Can Dance. They're there since the 80s. They have always produced, very left field, experimental, partly world music influenced music, and their music didn't touch me in the 80s and 90s. I didn't understand it back then, but in the new context I rediscovered some of their old music. And also Liza Gerard has a lot of other projects. She's also singing on a lot of soundtracks, for example, of the Gladiator movie that was produced by Hans Zimmer, the soundtrack of it, and her voice in that soundtrack is also beautiful. And I finally saw them live around, 2 years ago in Berlin, and I was sitting in the front row, and she was standing in front of me, that big lady with that out of this world voice, and it touched me to tears, because I could feel, the divineness that's going through her, and if I could work with these voices, that would be amazing. But I guess I have to create something before I can approach people like that and knock on their door and ask, hey, would you do a collaboration?